and there were always signs. If a Pole would keep somebody, a Jewish, the whole family gets killed. And they were scared. They took this little boy, they throw him into the water.
They killed him.
They throw him into the water, herangeworfen nach Wasser.
Yeah.
They
Drowned him.
They drown him, yeah. So, I had to say before I forgot.
So the Russians came into the camp?
Yeah, so anyway, after that, we went out, and I was still with Lola's mother. I was still by this woman, they killed this child. And they said that he got sick, and he died because he got sick. But they drowned him.
You were staying with these people? You visited them?
We came for the little boy.
I see.
And they mentioned that's the boy.
Drowned.
This child got sick and he died.
I see.
But then we find out that they drowned him.
I see.
Anyway, we were with the Russian. One time the daddy was walking on the street, and there was a group, Russian, the NKVD, maybe you hear about, like the Scotland Yard, like the Gestapo. There were a group Russian, and one was talking Yiddish. This was when the Russian just came in. And one said in Yiddish something, a few Jewish words. V'chiv shmoi, davai gengi, davai give the money and go home. Something like that in Russia.
Yeah.
You understand? V'chiv shmoi, and davai give me the money and go home in Russia. Anyway, hear that. The daddy, was very, very fast to make friends. He went to this group and he started to talk and he invited them to our place. In Częstochowa, I had a big apartment after a Volksstück. The daddy made business with him when the Germans were there, the Germans, after the war.
After the war, when you came out of the camp, what happened then?
When we walk out from the hospital, let's say.
Hartog.
Yeah. We went for this child, and he was sick.
Yeah.
After that, they went out, and I was staying by this woman in the same house. Just a little. They gave us coffee with a little cake. We ate, we drink. And I was with Lola's mother, and by these people. Then I said to Lola's mother, what for we got to sit here? Let's go out a little.
Yeah.
That time, the same day, the Russian marched in. This is the day the Russian marched in. While we walk out, we came to the main street, to the alleys in Częstochowa.
So the Russians didn't march into the camp. The Germans ran away, and you came out of the camp by yourself.
The Russian marched into the city. The Russian marched into the city to Częstochowa. And the Germans, they ran out, and that's it. That's the finish.
And you...
We walk out from the camp.
By yourselves?
Yeah. And while I walk out, and with Lola's mother, there was full of people. They were running, seven German, the Wehrmacht, German, plain soldiers, German. They were running in the middle of the road, and the whole street is black from people, Jews and Poles and children and grown up, all kinds of people. It was a live funeral, and there were 4 Russian on their horses were chasing them in the middle. You understand? They were chasing the 5 Germans. And the people were crying, yelling, for my mother, for my sister, for my brother, for the, Anyway, they were walking, running, and I was walking. I can't tell you how I looked that time. Then one went down from a horse, and he said to them, "Stupai," means stop, to the German. I'm yelling too much. And kneeing, so mannen die gekniet. And they stood up the hands. Ich bin unschuldig, ich bin unschuldig. They were yelling, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. The German who went down from the horse, he took the machine gun and
The Russian. This was
the Russian.
Yeah.
He took to the German, they all were lying on the floor, and they pulled away the boots and went away with the horses. This is what I saw.
How did the Russians treat the Jews?
They, very good.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh,
Yeah.
don't ask. They brought me to Vienna. One was a doctor, a beautiful, elegant man. He took a Russian big truck, and we took with a lot of Jews that survived. We took them with. The people went everywhere in the world. I don't know, to Israel, everywhere.
Why did you move to Vienna? Why didn't you not go back to change the hut?
I was two weeks in the 9th month with Alfie pregnant when I came to Vienna.
Why did you leave Poland? Did you
Because-
think about staying in Poland?
No. Listen, darling. Because the Poles, there was a new gang, and there was the Akovtsis, like they say, they killed the Jews after the war.
Arkovsis.
The Poles, yeah, it's like bandits, like Hitler's. They killed the Jews after the war. There was a couple, I was like that, and the daddy made business with a very nice couple Poles. They had a beautiful business where you go on the station, the first class, the second class, a buffet, you have a buffet with all stuff, with liqueurs, with all kinds of fruit, all kinds of meat, you know, in a restaurant. They had a beautiful big restaurant, they were nice people. And they liked Daddy very much. And the daddy was around. He had a beautiful wagon with 2 racehorses, and he was around the daddy. And they had all were big anti-Semites, the Akovtsis, the police. These when they killed the Jews.
The Akovsis were police?
No, they were like I don't know how to call them.
Okay.
They were like Hitler's. Anyway, we went to a ball, and the daddy said to a couple, yeah? Oh, leave the cat, that's the guy. He said, listen, come here, go to the music and tell them to play O Rosemary. They were dancing, it was a beautiful ball. And this couple went to bed, went home, and they shoot them. They were waiting near the door, and they shoot them when they went home. They killed them.
The Akovsis?
Yeah, they killed them. Anyway, then we hear they killed, it's a nice cat, they killed a doctor and a wife in Bydgoszcz in Poland. Anyway, I said to the pa, you can imagine, I was 2 weeks in the 9th month when I left Poland.
Did you hear about the pogrom in Kielce?
I hear everything. In Częstochowa were a lot of pogroms, always.
After the war, I hear there was a big pogrom in Kielce. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
That's why you moved to Vienna?
That's why I said, if I survive by Hitler, why should I wait till the Poles will kill me?
Why did you choose Vienna?
I didn't choose Vienna. I couldn't go far. This Russian, he was a doctor.
He sent you to Vienna?
No. We all Jews went. We went through Czechoslovakia, and we went through everywhere. When we came to a gate, he said, in Russia, Otkroi, open. In Russia, open the gate.
It was just some place to go.
Anyway, no.
Why did
You're
you go?
here, I was 2 weeks in the 9th month.
Why did you go to
I
Vienna?
couldn't go because I expect a baby any day.
Why did you go to Vienna?
I'm telling you, I couldn't go far because I was 2 weeks in the 9th month. I expect a baby, and we couldn't go far. The doctor said he's afraid, he doesn't want me to go far. So we stopped in Vienna.
Were you heading any place in particular?
No, I had nobody. I didn't go nowhere. I didn't pick anything. I didn't choose anything. We went that far, and that's it. We stopped in Vienna, and in Vienna
You took a train?
we took.
You
by bus with the Russian, yeah, with the Russian. There was a Russian driver, and this general, he was a very nice man.
This was the man who the Prom made friends with.
Who brought here, who brought us,
Okay.
and it was beautiful.
So now we are in Vienna. Maybe we should stop now and.
And in Vienna, then I can tell you even when I came to. Yeah, I think tomorrow we will talk a little.
I think we'll stop now and we'll continue when we can. Okay. Let's turn off the camera.
I will.
Andi, tos khere na kanangana.
This is Charles Kraus. Stay tuned for a discussion of the film you've just seen, for an update on the Guatemalan elections, and for some analysis of U.S. policy in Central America. The film you've just seen has generated a lot of controversy. It's been praised by some for its revealing account of the plight of Guatemala's Indians, and it's been condemned. The State Department considers it propaganda. With us for our own assessment, Doyle McManus of the Los Angeles Times, who spent years reporting on Central America. Harry Moses, a producer for CBS News and a veteran documentary filmmaker. Dr. Mark Falkoff, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and an expert on U.S. policy in Central America, and Pamela Yates, co-director of When the Mountains Tremble. Doyle, let me go to you first. Do you think that the film gives us an accurate picture of what was going on in the Guatemalan highlands 2 or 3 years ago when the film was made?
Charles, I think it's an achingly accurate and powerful portrayal of the situation up in the highlands a couple of years ago. The army was in control. It was sworn to wipe the guerrillas out. It did so with very little quarter. In many cases, it attacked large civilian populations in the area in doing so.
What about U.S. policy, though, which is another aspect of the film?
Well, that's one place where I think this film leaves aspects out and in fact may be misleading, because since 1977 there's been no U.S. military aid to Guatemala. In fact, one of the distinguishing things about the situation in Guatemala was that this pro-American conservative military government was essentially waging its guerrilla war with no direct help from the United States, and its leaders actually felt sometimes it was being impeded by the United States.
Pamela, misleading. State Department says it's propaganda. How do you respond?
I would say that When the Mountains Tremble is a highly subjective point of view film made by Tom Siegel and myself. It's really an attempt to put a human face on U.S. foreign policy and the events that happen in Guatemala. The majority of the film is based on what's going on in Guatemala, told by Guatemalans, by Rigoberta Menchú. And that's meant to be the body of the film, not a direct attack on U.S. foreign policy. Obviously, the Guatemalan military is the most sophisticated army in Central America, and it's done a lot of its work without help from the United States. Yet the United States has an enduring legacy in Guatemala since it engineered the 1954 coup against Jacobo Arbenz, the last democratically elected government before the present one.
All right, but you do bring President Reagan into it, and you do not, for example, mention that the Carter administration did cut off military aid, which might give people the impression that the United States has been providing the guns for all of this time.
You can't put everything in every single film. And I think what films like this do best, because this isn't a television reportage, what films like this do best is to try to give people an emotional understanding through one woman, one Guatemalan Indian woman, of what it actually may be like to live in Guatemala under the current regime.
All right.
It was never meant to be a textbook account of current events in Guatemala.
All right, let me ask Dr. Falkhoff. She says that they're trying to give a sense of the suffering and all of that that's been going on in Guatemala, but do you think that people have been misled by seeing this film?
I'm afraid I do. I think it's a little disingenuous to suggest that U.S. policy is not on the agenda of this film. The film begins with a dramatic characterization of the role of the United States in 1954. And I think I generally agree with the bottom line of those characterizations, although I don't think the role of United Fruit was anywhere near as important as the role of the Guatemalan Communist Party in provoking the role that the U.S. did play. But I think that the Carter administration's policy, which, by the way, has continued under the present Reagan administration, largely due to congressional constraints, but for whatever reason, is in some ways an attempt to respond to the indictment of the role of the U.S. in '54. If we did something wrong in the past, let's try to rectify it in the present. That was certainly very strongly the motivation of the Carter administration in 1977 when it cut off military aid and training for the military, and even to some degree, I think it inspires the continuing concern in Congress, which has extended to the point even of denying Guatemala economic aid under this long succession of military governments since '77.
Let's take up another point, and that is, though, do you think that the film has in some way romanticized the insurgents and painted them? Do we know enough about them from the film to make an intelligent decision about what is going on in Guatemala?
Well, I feel that it has romanticized the insurgents to the point of not telling us very much about them, who they are, what they stand for. They are not a bunch of revolutionary Christians. They are Marxist-Leninists. I've seen their literature, their propaganda. It's no secret. There are revolutionary Christians in Guatemala, and they do, some of them, support the guerrillas. But it seems to me that there's a great deal of blurring of just who the guerrillas are, what they stand for, where they get their aid from, and to what degree they have widespread support. Also, it, I think, artificially polarizes the situation because most Guatemalans are somewhere in the middle. And all the polls I've seen, including a recent one done, commissioned by a Guatemalan public opinion firm in January of, let's see, this was October of '84, most Guatemalans describe themselves, 50% describe themselves at the center, 31% of the right, 7% of the left. What's even more interesting is as you decline in socioeconomic category, there is less support from the left.
All right. Let me ask Harry Moses, do you, from your viewing of the film, is it overly romantic? Does it give us enough information if it is...
No, but it depends on what it purports to be. Now, if the film purports to be a journalistic endeavor, then of course it doesn't. If it is framed from the outset so that the viewer understands that this is a polemic, that these are people who came down committed to make a certain kind of film, then I have less problem with it. But what bothers me somewhat about it is that there are certain facts in it, and then you start to develop a feel for some characters, and you start not to like other characters. Every time you see the army, this kind of evil kind of music comes on. You don't get that with the guerrillas. I just found, I don't know Guatemala all that well, but I've been down there a couple of times, tried to make a story, but to do a story, couldn't do it because I couldn't get the information together. But it's pretty bad down there, and it's fairly repressive. And I just think that by doing a little reporting, you might have been able to help yourself rather than hurt yourself. I found that the credibility factor was starting to get to me a little because there was such an obvious bias in the film that riveting scenes, the most powerful scene, for example, the scene of the guy at the funeral, which is a wonderful scene. I asked myself, is that real or isn't it? And the only reason I asked myself that is because there were romanticized parts of the film, and it made me question the other stuff. I think you were kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit, because I think if there'd been a little more reporting, it would have made your case maybe even stronger.
Well, let's ask Pamela.
Well, maybe I should clarify something. It's not that we went down to Guatemala to make a certain kind of film. Tom Siegel and I have been working in Central America for 6 years, both on independent films, network news, and special network documentaries. And so this film, this feature-length film, was in many ways like a book would be to a print journalist. It was based on many years of experience in the region, and yet it was impressions of that. I don't think that we romanticized the Guatemalan guerrilla movement or the Guatemalan opposition movement. I think that we brought back the first pictures of that movement from Guatemala and have, in effect, added to the foreign policy debate and added to the kind of information that Americans have about Guatemala. We combine journalism with a highly lyric and stylized form of documentary. And I think that that's what's controversial about the piece, not only the content, but the form in which we chose to do it, which has been characterized as propagandistic, but I happen to think is a much more interesting way of presenting information than your usual format television documentary.
All right, but let's go to a couple of things very quickly. There has been some question raised about the historic dramatizations and also particularly about the voices. There's a kind of good guy, bad guy voice used that kind of, some people have said kind of distorts things. So why did you do it that way?
I think actually, a lot of people have mentioned that. I think it was a mistake the way that we did it. What we tried to do when we did the voiceover from the Spanish to the English was have the actors mime the voices in the original Spanish. And the way it came out is not very, very accurate, I think, to the original characters. As with many low-budget films, when you make a mistake the first time, you can't really go back and fix it the second time. If we had had the money to go back and redo that, we definitely would have. I think it's, what we tried to do throughout the film was let people think for themselves, listen to people talk, and make their own decisions.
Okay. We're almost out of time, so I guess I'd like to ask you one last question, and that is, there have been elections recently in Guatemala. From what you know of the situation in the highlands, do you see any hope that things are going to change for the better for the Indians, and what will that do to the insurgency?
I think that the elections did represent a ray of hope, because things were so bleak in Guatemala, and the killings were going on. However, as when Benicio Cerezo takes office, it remains to be seen, really, whether he's a puppet government in order to encourage foreign investment and loans into Guatemala, or whether he'll really be able to take a stand against the army. The army, the Guatemalan army, is the principal political actor in Guatemala. As long as there continues to be an insurgency, and there are signs now that the insurgency is reactivating, the mass movement is again in the cities, the army will face that insurgency, and I'm not sure how much power they're going to allow the civilian government.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of our panel for having been with us tonight. I'm sorry we're out of time. Armed revolution is one way to bring about change. Another is democratic elections. On December 8th, Benicio Cerezo won 68% of the vote in a runoff election. He'll become Guatemala's first civilian president in 15 years. Like many other Guatemalans, he has personally suffered for his opposition to military rule. Benicio Cerezo, 5 years ago, a prisoner in his own home, the target of 3 assassination attempts, a man who campaigned with a pistol tucked in his belt, now the president-elect of Guatemala. Cerezo's victory in the December 8th runoff election was a near certainty. Last November, during the first round of balloting, he captured 39% of the vote, far ahead of his 7 opponents. With most of the candidates crowding the right wing of the political spectrum, the decisive victory for Cerezo and his center-left Christian Democrats is widely viewed as a mandate for change.
We are going to give any institution and any political party the chance to participate in the agreement, in the national agreement, to improve the real democracy in the country. And in relationship with the Grupo de Apoyo Mutuo, I will permit and support the Supreme Court to do the things they have to do in favor of the respect of the human rights.
But even observers impressed with the fairness of the election process remain skeptical about just how much change Cerezo can achieve. He's ruled out land reform, fearing reaction from powerful business interests. And when asked whether he thought the army would fully withdraw from politics, he answered, "We do not believe in magic." The army remains the key player. Guatemala's crumbling political and economic landscape induced military leaders to call for elections, but the military still holds enormous power. In the countryside, army-run strategic hamlets separate the people from the guerrillas. Indian peasants are forced to join civilian patrols, and the army controls all government rural development programs in the highlands. So many questions remain. Will the army bow to civilian authority? Will it permit real social change? Will it curb human rights abuses? It never has before, but perhaps the elections are a sign that a new era has begun for the army and for Guatemala. That is clearly the Reagan administration's hope. The day after Cerezo's election, the State Department expressed U.S. pleasure with the outcome.
The department congratulates the Guatemalan people for their strong reaffirmation of support for democracy and for the peaceful manner in which they participated in the political process. We strongly support this demonstration of faith in the democratic process so that it will mark the beginning of a new phase in Guatemalan history. We equally applaud the Guatemalan government for having upheld its pledge of political neutrality and non-interference in the campaign. We look forward to working closely with the new Guatemalan government in its efforts to improve human rights, expand economic opportunities for all Guatemalans, and in the search for a lasting peace in the region.
Joining us now for an assessment of Guatemala's prospects, Guatemala's ambassador to the United States, Eduardo Palomo, Congressman Peter Kostmeyer, a Democrat from Pennsylvania and member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And also joining us, Dr. George Forial, a resident fellow at the Georgetown University Center for Strategic and International Studies. He was also a member of the official U.S. observer team to the Guatemalan elections. We had hoped to have a Republican member of Congress with us as well, but unfortunately, he had to cancel at the last moment. Let's go to you, Dr. Forial. You were there. Were the elections as free and fair as has been reported?
I think they were, in terms of the techniques of the elections, about as good, as efficient, and as fair as one can make them. The technical aspect is, I think, the part that really needs to be emphasized favorably.
Now, there has been an insurgency in Guatemala. Did the far left participate in these elections? Did they try and stop them? What was their response?
The indication seems to be that the left did not make a major attempt, if any attempt, to inhibit the process of elections. How they participated is one can only speculate. Certainly, a portion of the left-wing portion of the electorate must have voted, but it's a little unclear how they did so.
All right, let's go to Ambassador Palomo. Vinicio Cerezo won 68% of the vote, which is an overwhelming majority. Does he have a mandate for change now?
I certainly think he has a mandate for change, and not only the Guatemalan people in general, but the principal traditional institutions of power in Guatemala look at it that way. Also, I think the international community.
But now he himself has said that he didn't raise a question of land reform, for example, because he was afraid that that would cause a reaction and he either wouldn't be elected or wouldn't be allowed to take office.
Well, it isn't exactly that. He said it was a political and a technical thing to look at it because we already had an experience of land reform. It was in 1945, and we gathered, and I think Vinicio gathered too, that in order to have a land reform, you also have to have a lot of resources because you have to educate the people so that the land is properly used, because this is one of the main problems in Guatemala, educating the people in order to know how to handle things like this.
But in general terms, do you think he's going to be able to make changes that may affect the interests of the wealthy people in Guatemala and the military?
Let's put it in a positive way. I would say that Vinicio will try to make the necessary changes in the country. I said will try. It's politics. It's a matter of trying to do things. It's not, I mean, a way of getting to things, because there might be obstacles in the way, but I'm sure he will try to do things, not with the idea of affecting things, but creating the environment and the conditions the country needs. His party has put out a document which is called Proyecto Nacional, National Project, which has different I will say etaps, would you say? Steps. And the first steps, I would think, would be to try to consolidate his mandate and his government, trying to see what are the differences between the different sectors of the country, the different institutions, and try to create what he say a national consensus. Otherwise, he won't be able to carry on any program. And I think that's very smart in his thinking this way, because he has to create this consensus before that. And then he has to, at the same time, face the tremendous financial and economic problems facing the country. For example, we have a balance of payment which is very deficitary.
All right, but let me just break in for a moment. But I want to ask Dr. Forial, do you think that there's any danger that an election like this could, if he isn't able to make changes, is it going to raise false hopes that will discredit democracy in a country like Guatemala?
Well, it's a problem that Central America faces as a whole, but I think at this point the question is you know, what are the hopes of the people and what are the possibilities of the government? And I think at this point there is, as the ambassador I think implied, there is the beginnings of a consensus. The election I think showed that a moderate electorate, a population could elect a moderate candidate, and with a considerable amount of overwhelming support. And certainly I think there is a period of not only of hope that things will happen and things will change, but I think there's a period of goodwill on the various parts of society to make that happen. Now, one can speculate about the future, but at this point I think one can be relatively certain that a forward movement will in fact occur.
All right, let me ask Congressman Kosmeier. The United States over the last 7 or 8 years has not given aid to Guatemala and in a sense has tried to pressure the military. Are these elections and this fairly apparently free election, is this the result of U.S. policy and U.S. pressure?
Well, the only reason that the United States has not given military aid, of course, is not because the Reagan administration has not asked for it. They have asked for it every year since coming to office. The only reason is the Congress has rejected it. I think the ambassador hit the nail on the head when he said that President Cerezo will try to do these things. Whether or not he'll be able to do them because of the dominance of the military still in Guatemala really is the issue. And the question the Congress will have to face is this the time to strengthen the military's hand in Guatemala with direct military assistance, or is this the time to strengthen the civilian, moderate, middle sector? And I think the answer is that this is not the time to provide more military assistance, but as usual, and as is always the case with the Reagan administration, they want military assistance.
All right. On the other hand, some of President-elect Cerezo's people have been quoted as saying that he would hope to get something like $300 million in the first 6 months of his presidency in economic aid in order to revitalize the economy. And he apparently sees that as his central goal right now. Is Congress going to provide him with that kind of money?
Congress will not provide him with that much. One never gets as much as one wants. But there is, in the budget for this year, about $80 million in economic assistance, and some military assistance, much less, as well. But I think the sense in Congress is that this man ought to be supported, that he's a Democrat with a small d, he's a moderate, he's moving in the right direction, and it is in our interest to do all we can to help Guatemala with its very severe economic problem.
All right, let me go to Dr. Forial. Do you, from having been down there and studied this country in Central America, is the United States, is it a case where we're kind of half supporting these countries and then they do begin a return to democracy, but we don't do enough? What is your view?
Well, I think in the case of Guatemala, to stay with Guatemala, we clearly, as the congressman indicate, have not been supporting the country in a major way, not only obviously militarily, but even economically, particularly in comparison to the efforts that are being poured into neighboring countries, in El Salvador and Honduras in particular. However, at this point, we are at a critical juncture where clearly a change has occurred in Guatemala. And clearly there is at this point, in fact, a need, not only for the United States, but for the international community to help this process sustain itself. And to that extent, therefore, the United States does have a critical role to play, where if it provides that help or if it denies that assistance, will in fact make a critical difference in the future of the democratic process of Guatemala.
General Mejia Victorias, who's now the president of Guatemala, has spoken very bitterly about U.S. policy regarding Guatemala. Do you think the military, how will they react if they aren't rewarded, if they don't get military aid?
Well, I don't think they will react badly because there is nothing for them to do, and the issue is not mainly military aid. I would say that from the point of view of the new government, after we have heard the new elected president elected, is economic aid in order to solve the economic and social problems of Guatemala. The militaries have been able to prove that by themselves they have counterattacked the big insurgency we had in the past.
There would be real problems, wouldn't there, Mr. Ambassador, if the civilian government moved too quickly on human rights, too quickly on land redistribution, too quickly, for example, on bringing to justice those military officers responsible for more than 100,000 deaths in Guatemala since the late 1970s. As you know, such people have now been convicted in Argentina, but that's not likely to happen for obvious reasons in Guatemala. So the president can move very slowly and very carefully because the military is still very, very strong in Guatemala, and that's really the issue, isn't it?
Well, the military and the private sector and the church and other sectors in Guatemala are the traditional forces that we have had.
And that won't change.
They will change. They are changing. They are flexibilizing their position.
Really the issue.
This is the idea. I mean, things are changing. I mean, the first objective would have to be to flexibilize, I would say, to flexibilize the traditional positions. I mean, Benicio has to be a very smart politician and understand that he cannot change things from one day to the other. But he will try, as I said before, to create the conditions that will be able to to have a democracy in Guatemala as much as we can have it.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, Congressman Kosmeyer, and Dr. Foriel for being with us tonight. We hope this program has been informative and thought-provoking. We also hope it's contributed to your understanding of the issues facing Guatemala, Central America, and the United States. I'm Charles Kraus. Good night.
Well, a move from the world of Guatemala and the succession of military regimes to the SCTV Comedy Network and the Mellonville election results with Jimmy the Greek and Earl Camembert next tonight on Channel 9. Then it's back to cross-cultural conflict and the story of the Hopi and the Navajo and their land disputes that are threatening to disrupt their traditional lifeways on Trouble on Big Mountain on Express at 11:25 tonight. Guatemala and the story of these people will be shown again this coming Saturday evening on Channel 32 at 9 o'clock. Interested in exploring other parts of the world? Well, this Saturday night, join the droll Brian Thompson for a journey down the River Nile at 8 p.m., followed by an examination of the Kingdom of Farouk, the last of the pharaohs, Saturday night at 9.
Funding for this program was made possible by this station and other public television stations.
Wednesday night at 8 on Express. Our special year-ender begins with a disturbing look at the disappearance of wetlands around San Francisco Bay. Development is squeezing out valuable lands that are home to thousands of migratory birds. Just as biologists are discovering the importance of these areas, once thought useless, developers are exploiting loopholes in federal law to circumvent protection of the wetlands.
There's a burst of interest in development right now, and there are legal ways to develop wetlands. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out those ways.
And we'll also be taking a new look at some of this year's biggest Express stories. AIDS, South Africa, the Embarcadero Freeway. We'll update how those issues have changed and how those changes will affect all of us. Join us Wednesday at 8 as we take stock. Then at 8:30, a different approach to the news. The latest Mark Russell comedy special, a satirical look at what's new and what's topical. That's the Mark Russell Comedy Special, Wednesday night at 8:30, following our special year-ender on Express at 8, here on member-supported KQED, Channel 9, San Francisco.
Then, at 9 o'clock tomorrow night.
It's been called the greatest play ever written, and stars perhaps the most accomplished actor of our time. Supported by one of the finest casts ever assembled for a Shakespearean production. Laurence Olivier's King Lear.
Laurence Olivier and King Lear. The great productions, the great actors. Join us tomorrow evening at 9 o'clock for a theatrical experience with John Hurt and Diana Rigg. 9 p.m. tomorrow here on KQED Channel 9, San Francisco.
We have had a very successful December. I want to thank you very much, those of you who were kind enough to send us your membership check during the last month. And also, for those of you who pledged during our Winter Festival, now's the time for you to get that check into us. If you get it in before the end of the year, of course, it'll be a tax deduction for you. And speaking of that, if you're already a member and you received a letter from me on our assurance fund, it's a great opportunity to take advantage of a tax deduction for yourself and assure the long-term quality programming that Channel 9 provides. Thank you.
On the last episode of SCTV...
I'm Bud Robertson. And I'm Earl Camembert, reminding you to stay tuned to SCTV for all of today's election results, when Floyd and I will be on the air at 8 o'clock tonight with Mellon Vote, It's Your Decision. We'll be covering the hotly contested race for mayor between incumbent Tommy Shanks and Vic Hedges.
Hey, I made a lot of mistakes in my personal life, and I'll probably make mistakes as mayor, but I'll tell you one thing. If I do make a mistake, you're going to know about it, because with me as your mayor, there'll be no surprises.
Hi, how you doing? I'm Tommy Shanks, and I'm doing pretty good myself. Well, it's election year. I'm running for mayor. So vote for me and get me out of here.
And we'll be closely following that very crucial race for a city council seat between Libby Wolfson and Robert Wellesley.
So what about wars? How do they fit in?
What do you mean?
Well, are you for them or against them?
Well, I'm not for any war, of course, but that's not really a municipal issue, is it? And that's really what we're dealing with here, I think, is municipal issues.
Well, that's a very good point. I never thought of it that way.
We'll be looking at the race for Board of Education with a candidate who, in my opinion, should be running for Hollywood gossip columnist rather than Board of Education, Mr. Troy Soren.
Personally, I think I'm a heck of a lot more qualified than a lot of those turkeys on the Board of Education today. But the reality is, I've been a substitute teacher for 2 years. I've tutored. I'm still involved in scouting.
Also, with the computer technology we have at our disposal this year, we'll be whipping every other station in town with our projections. We'll be projecting winners so fast it'll make your head spin.
Let the debate begin. Well, I'd like to start off by saying that I don't think any candidate's mental state should be an issue in this campaign.
All I've got to say to the voters is take a good look at Mr. Hedges and really think, would you buy a used car from him?
So be sure to watch all the election coverages tonight here on SCTV on Mellon Vote. It's your decision.
Tired of ordinary television? Don't touch that dial. SCTV is now on the air. Starring John Candy, Joe Flaherty, Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, and Martin Short. Television like you've never seen it before. This is the SCTV Television Network.
On today's episode of SCTV,
President, Mellonville Ichthyology Boosters Club. Member, Mellonville Motor League. 4-time blood donor. Alternate judge of Mellonville annual Make It With Pork Festival. Refreshments consultant, Mellonville Snooker Days. Co-publisher and editor of Keep Rabies Out of Mellonville pamphlet. When a man gives 27 years service to the community, the list of accomplishments gets pretty long. And the mind boggles. Right now, Tommy Shanks' mind is boggling.
How you doing? I'm doing pretty good myself. Get me out of here, please. Bug night.
He'd be a great mayor anywhere, but get him out of there. On Election Day, vote Tommy Shanks for mayor.
Dom and Vince DeFilippo respond to their critics.
See any crime here? There's no crime!
It's very safe!
It's perfectly safe, not being gunned down!
I suppose I was just nice!
Here, perfectly safe!
It's a lot of hype you're reading about. It's not true! There's no truth to it!
The whole thing.
You're safe!
This is a campaign film currently running for Dom and Vince DeFilippo. In 2 years as district attorney, they couldn't even get an adjournment. You could do better, but I'm running.
Paid for by the committee to defeat Dom and Vince DeFilippo.
It's Mellon Vote, live from Mellonville Center. Live from Meckling. Live from Partytown. Live from North Mellonville and the borough of Mellon. It's Mellon Vote Live with our anchor team, Floyd Robertson, Earl Cannonbear, Tony Vive, and political analysis by Jimmy the Greek. And live from the headquarters of the candidates, Mayor Tommy Shanks, Vic Hedges, Libby Wolfson, Robert Wellesley, Troy Soren, and the DeFilippo brothers. And now, live from Election Central at SCTV, it's Mellon Vote Live. And here is Floyd Robertson and Earl Cannonbear.
Good evening, everybody. Well, the campaigning is over. The hoopla and promises, the speeches and parades,
The spending and the showbiz glitter that have become a major part of all elections have ground to a halt as the voters make their way to the booths to exercise the democratic process. In a matter of hours, the people of Mellonville and the Tri-County area will know who are the victors and who are the vanquished.
But our viewers will find out right now, Floyd, because we have all the projected winners, even though the polls opened just a few minutes ago. With the help of computer technology supplied to Election Central by Harry's Home Computers and Sexual Aids, remember Harry, he's the guy with the snake on his face. And if you haven't voted yet, I would suggest not even bothering. It'll only be a wasted trip because we're announcing all the winners right now. So just save yourself the effort and...
Earl, I'd just like to remind our voters that these are projected winners. This is not the official vote tally.
Take a gander at this upset. Tommy Shanks, the incumbent, in a projected defeat. An overwhelming landslide victory by mayoral hopeful Vic Hedges. And Floyd, quite frankly, this has to be the upset of the decade. Everyone in the media, myself included, thought His Honor Mayor Tommy Shanks would certainly get a huge sympathy vote. Good gosh, he's been in office almost as long as I've been a professional journalist. And look at this, another projection. Libby Wolfson defeating the incumbent councilperson, Robert Wellesley. This is just phenomenal. These projections are great. I never thought they'd work so fast myself. This is...
All right, Earl.
I think we've got every station beat on this, Floyd. I don't think anybody's projected that. Just...
All right, Earl, why don't you just take a deep breath, all right, while I remind our viewers that these are just projections. However, the numbers do seem to indicate unexpected results, and we'll certainly keep you informed of the latest developments here. Now, just a reminder that we will be turning to our guest analyst, Jimmy the Greek, for his analysis of the odds-on favorites in today's elections, as well as live reports from our polling booths for voter reactions and live reports from campaign headquarters.
We're covering everything. There's not one thing in this campaign we're not covering here at SCTV, and ironically, we don't need any of it because the election is over. We've projected all the winners. As far as I'm concerned, it's
Earl.
that's the ball game.
All right, Earl,
now.
please, that's enough, all right?
Well, I mean, if you want to just go through the motions on this, Floyd, I'll go along with you on that. It's a waste of time as far as I'm concerned.
Pardon me, just 1 second here. Wait a minute. We've just received word that Board of Education candidate Troy Soren has arrived at polling booth A. So here with a live report is Connie Beaver.
That's Bivet, Floyd. Here he comes now. Mr. Soren.
I'm not interested.
Mr. Soren.
I am not interested.
Mr. Soren, we're just trying to give you proper coverage as one of the candidates.
Really? Would you like me to tell you what I think of SCTV and its news department?
If you like.
All right. I think it's a disgrace. The worst in Mellonville. When you have someone like an Earl Canonbear who is completely prejudiced and biased toward any sort of liberal attitude, even before you start. I mean, it's like you have to be a member of the John Birch Society before you even get any focus.
Well, then how do you explain your own refusal to speak to the media about your personal activities? No comment? Well, I guess that's it. Back to you, Floyd.
Now, Mr. Soren, obviously with a chip on his shoulder. Well, that's unfortunate because looking at the race for the Board of Education, Mr. Soren needs all the friends he can get. Haskell and Wexler, the two frontrunners, neck and neck at this point, and we'll keep a close eye on that one for you.
Floyd, an update on the many propositions on the ballot this year. The proposition to have an Up with Mellonville campaign has been voted down. That's the second time, incidentally. And the proposition to build a second nuclear dump site has been approved by an overwhelming 98% of the voters, making Mellonville one of the few cities in the world, I suppose, to come out in favor of multi-nuclear dump sites.
Well, joining us in the studio tonight with his analysis on today's elections and how the votes might sway is Jimmy the Greek. Jimmy, this mayoral campaign, according to Earl's projections, is turning out to be a complete upset. How does Vegas see it?
Well, Floyd, there's no question that the early smart money was being laid on Shanks, even though it meant giving up 1.5 points. Well, late smart money shifted to Hedges and what some high rollers were calling the Mellonville lock of the century. Earlier in the week, the outlaw line out of East Mellonville established Shanks as a 7-5 favorite, with a lot of the wise guys seeking the middle as Shanks moved to 6.5 to 5.5 2 days ago when Shanks' condition was revealed. Some of the shops took the elections off the board until the steam moved to Hedges as the odds shifted to 6 to 5, picking with a lot of punters getting down in straight 11 to 10 bets when the books put up 27,326 total for a combined voter turnout in the Tri-City area. Action was heavy today as Hedges established himself as a heavy even money favorite with a lot of small local money in the $2 to $3 range, parlaying the dog to the overs, while a lot of dime action was laying the half point on sentimental favorite Tommy Shanks. Personally, I'm predicting Vic Hedges to win by a landslide. Now, in the race for council person, the odds are prohibitive. I talked to most of the bookies in town, and nobody seems to want to take or be Wolfson. Well, back to you, Floyd.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy. One of the more controversial races in the municipal election has been between well-known talk show hostess Libby Wolfson and incumbent councilman Robert Wellesley. Now, I understand we've got an early result there. Earl?
Floyd, I don't have all the details yet, but it would appear that only minutes after the polls opened, Libby Wolfson conceded. Libby Wolfson, of course, one of our projected winners, and so she really messed that one up for us. Miss Wolfson was ahead in the voting at the time, and I see our cameras are ready now, standing by, so we go to Robert Wellesley's campaign headquarters and our reporter, Gump Smithers.
A very excited and somewhat confused crowd of Robert Wellesley's supporters is waiting for their candidate to come out onto the stage here. It has been confirmed that Libby Wolfson has indeed conceded. And here comes Robert Wellesley now. And with him is his opponent in the election, Libby Wolfson.
Let me first thank all of you who have given so tirelessly, so generously of your time during this campaign. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you, all my friends. Thank you, Bob. Good to see you. Now, let me say, first of all, that there are those who would say that this district is on the skids. I don't think so.
I don't.
There are those who would say that the historical buildings in our city should be torn down for the sake of a few greedy developers. I don't think so.
Nobody here.
There are those who would say the bread drops cannot be rerouted. I don't think so.
Nobody does. Nobody does. Nobody does. As you know, I conceded in this election, and I would just like to explain why. Because I believe that this man has done more for this North American society than any politician, past or present, big or small, or anything that he is. I believe that besides being a very intelligent and handsome man, he is also a winner. And as a media personality, Libby Wolfson, and as a personal friend, I believe that it is incumbent upon me to give him my untiring and generous support. I think so.
Thank you very much, Libby.
Robert, I'm not finished. Just hold on for 1 second. Hold on. We live in this North American society today in very inflationary and uncertain times. And this has had an effect on each and every one of us, including celebrities such as myself. But I feel now that Robert Wellesley has won this election, that we are on the dawn of a new beginning. This is a town that some people may call Mellonville. I call it Camelot!
There you have it. Robert Wellesley has been re-elected as councilperson.
Did I say something wrong?
And we now return you to Election Central.
Is this microphone on?
We'll be back with more election results right after these commercial messages.
Stay tuned for more Mellon Vote election results on SCTV.
New Year's Eve at 9, KQED presents the Zazu Pitts Memorial Orchestra in concert. Full version on Channel 9, a synchronized TV verite version on Channel 32, and a stereo simulcast on the City 99 FM.
I
Don't miss the Zazu Pitts Memorial Orchestra playing Sea Cruise, Heat Wave, Dance to the Music, Shout, Shotgun, and 35 other 60s hits. Watch the full concert here on Channel 9, Extra Vision on Channel 32, and listen in Zazu-Rama Stereo on the City 99 FM. Spend New Year's Eve safely at home with this 2.5-hour musical extravaganza beginning at 9 p.m.
There's a conflict going on between the Hopi and the Navajo in the southwestern United States over land. Who has title to what? They've been bumped around enough, now they're quarreling amongst themselves. The story of the disruption of their lifeways on KQED's Express after our SCTV comedy network continues for another several minutes tonight here on Channel 9.
Coming to SCTV.
The day I adopted you was the greatest thing what I did.
Hey, Pop, I'm sorry I gotta go now. I've got shul tonight.
What?
We've been through this so many times. I don't want to be a soul singer. I want to be a cantor.
You've got the potential to be the greatest cantor of all time.
Shay!
Never start without the cantor. He's so enthusiastic, sir.
The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jarreau, soon on SCTV.
Welcome back. Earl Cannonbear here at Election Central along with Floyd Robertson. And let's take a look at that neck-and-neck race for district attorney. It still looks pretty close, not exactly neck and neck. Our projected winner in this race, of course, the DiFilippo brothers. And it would appear that we might have jumped the gun on that just a little bit. But it's not over yet, and as you know, anything can happen. Meanwhile, I'll have that computer checked out.
Have yourself checked out while you're at it. Well, then, looks like Proposition 38, that controversial returnable bottle bill, is going to be going down to defeat. A disappointing night for all the anti-glass faction people.
Depending on how you interpret that, Floyd, I believe the strong no vote means yes to returnable bottles, in which case it wouldn't be a disappointing night at all.
Well, no, I don't think so, Earl. If the board is correct, the popular vote is saying no to returnable bottles.
No to the anti-returnable bottle law, yes to returnable bottles.
Well, Earl, the proposition was in favor of returnable bottles. A no vote means no to the proposition, not no to disposable bottles.
And that's what you think, is it, Floyd? If I may, I think you're confusing an already complicated situation here. Let me try to clarify that. In this reporter's opinion, as I read it, no to the proposition means yes to disposable bottles.
That's what I said.
Oh. Well, then, I guess we'll have it then.
What?
Returnable bottles.
No! We won't have returnable bottles. We'll have disposable bottles. Well, looking down at the race for the Board of Education, and we've got a hot one going there between the two front-runners, Haskell and Wexler. Candidate Troy Soren, interestingly enough, is not conceded. Let's go once again live to our correspondent, Tony Bivet.
Here comes mayoral candidate Vic Hedges. Mr. Hedges?
No. Talk to my lawyer.
Mr. Hedges, we just want to know who you voted for.
Well, I voted for myself about 10 or 12 times.
There you have it.
It was a joke. I was
Vic
kidding.
Hedges,
I was kidding. It was a joke.
He has tampered with
Come
the
back.
vote
It was a
in such
joke.
a way as to register more than one vote.
I was kidding. Can't you take a joke?
Which,
Come
of course,
on.
is a felony, and if convicted, could bring Mr. Hedges a lengthy prison term.
Look, it was a joke. Can't you take a joke, Beaver?
That's Bivet. Back to you, Floyd.
Thank you, Tony. Well, we now have the awaited results in the mayoral contest. Tommy Shanks, the incumbent, has defeated Vic Hedges by a wide margin. A clear-cut victory for Mayor Tommy Shanks. And we're going to try to get a hookup with Mayor Shanks, who is at home right now recuperating.
And congratulations go out to Mayor Tommy Shanks from all of us here at SCTV Election Central. Looking down at some of the other finals, Libby Wolfson, of course, conceded in her race to councilperson Robert Wellesley. That, of course, earlier in the evening.
Earl, that was another one of your projections that went down the toilet, wasn't it?
Oh, why don't you go have a drink? I didn't build the damn computers. Big deal. So I'm wrong. What's the matter? Don't I get handed bulletins anymore?
Earl, do you want to read this?
I don't want to read it. Did he give it to me? He didn't give it to me. If he'd have given it to me, I'd read the bulletin. You go ahead and read it then. Big deal.
Well, we now have a live hookup at the home of Mayor Tommy Shanks, a clear-cut victor in tonight's contest. And now, His Honor, Mayor Tommy Shanks.
Hi, how you doing? I'm doing pretty good myself. Well, you got me out of there, and I thank you. I sure am glad that Marjorie Morningstar didn't win. I'd make a much better emperor than she would. Well, good night.
Once again, our congratulations to Mayor Tommy Shanks. And that just about wraps it up from Election Central. Earl?
It certainly does, Floyd. You know, and it gives one pause for thought about something that we so often take for granted in this country, democracy. I couldn't help but think that had a Russian fellow dropped into Mellonville today during the hustle and bustle of the elections, he might have stopped someone on the street, a citizen, perhaps, and he might have asked, say, comrade, what's going on? The citizen might have replied, why, I'm on my way to vote. I'm on my way to decide who will be everything from dog catcher to mayor. You're the one who decides? The Russian chap might query. You must be a very powerful man. Yes, I am, would come the reply. Who are you? The Ruskie might ask quizzically. We, the people, would come the reply.
What would happen then?
Oh, well, I guess the citizen would just proceed on his way, just walk up the street, I guess.
Well, what's the point?
Well, I think you'd have a pretty surprised commie on your hands, Floyd.
One final projection, an early retirement for yours truly. Now, from Election Central, this is Floyd Robertson.
And Earl Cannonbear.
Good night.
Night-night. Stay home. Have a happy. Not a bad story, huh?
Did you write that? Did you write that yourself? Load it up.
Just a little statement on the democratic process, democracy, commies.
The Hopi and the Navajo have lived in the same part of the world for many hundred years. They've also been moved around a bit by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Now they're having their own land dispute amongst themselves. Will it tear them apart? Trouble on Big Mountain on KQED's Express, about a minute from now. The next SCTV will be Friday night when we'll present great Mellonville updates and Mellonville Nightline and a new screenwriter at 11 o'clock Friday.
Saturday night at 10 on Agony, our new British comedy series, Lawrence complains Jane has no time for him while Jane feels compelled to counsel her gay neighbors.
You're never in.
You're always out.
Well, you're out jogging 25 hours a day. I keep thinking you're going to jog off with someone else and not come back.
If I had all the affairs you accuse me of, I'd be in intensive care.
British comedy on Agony, Saturday night at 10 on Channel 9. Then at 10:30, Basil is confused by guests registering to stay at Fawlty Towers.
You're in room 5, Doctor.
And Mrs. Abbott, how do you do?
Dr. Abbott, actually.
I'm sorry?
Dr. Abbott.
2 doctors.
You're 2 doctors?
Yes.
Well, how did you become 2 doctors? That's most unusual. I mean, did you take the exam twice? Or...
No, my wife's a doctor.
I'm a doctor.
You're a doctor, too. So you're 3 doctors.
No, I'm just...
John Cleese in Fawlty Towers, Saturday night at 10:30 on Channel 9. Then at 11, don't miss the latest Mark Russell comedy special. That's Saturday night following Agony and Fawlty Towers here on your comedy station, Channel 9, KQED, San Francisco.
The more than 200,000 members of KQED with their continuing support make possible the production and presentation of tonight's Express.
Tonight on Express, 2 Indian tribes and the U.S. government in a range war that marks the largest forced relocation since the Japanese internment during World War II. It's costing taxpayers $500 million. And for the Hopi and Navajo, their culture and possibly their lives when trouble comes to Big Mountain. That's tonight on Express.
Trouble on Big Mountain is a co-production of KQED San Francisco and KAET Phoenix. Funding for this program was provided in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.